There's a specific kind of trust you give a stranger every single time you get into a car with them. You don't think about it that way most of the time. You open an app, you watch a little car icon move toward you on a map, a car pulls up, you check the license plate against your phone screen, and you get in. The whole transaction takes maybe 90 seconds, and somewhere in those 90 seconds, you have decided to trust a complete stranger with your physical safety for the next 15 or 20 minutes. Most of the time, that trust is completely fine. Millions of these rides happen every single day without incident. The driver gets you where you're going, you rate them 5 stars, you forget their name by the next morning. I want to tell you about the one ride where that trust turned into something I still think about years later every time I open a Rideshare app. I was 24, living in Denver, working late at a marketing job that kept me at the office most nights until 9 or 10. I didn't have a car at the time. I'd sold mine after a lease ended and hadn't gotten around to replacing it. So Rideshare apps were basically how I lived my life. Work, home, grocery store, friends' apartments, dozens of rides a month, all logged in an app, all with drivers whose faces I mostly forgot within minutes. On a Tuesday night in October, I finished work around 9:40 p.m. and requested a ride home the way I had done hundreds of times before. The driver's name was Marcus, 4.9 stars, a gray sedan, clean, ordinary, nothing about the request screen that stood out at all. He pulled up 4 minutes later. The first few minutes of the ride were completely unremarkable, which is exactly why I want to walk you through them slowly. I got in, I said hello, he said hello back, friendly, a little tired sounding, the way people sound at the end of a long shift. He asked how my night was going. I said long but almost over now. He laughed and said he knew the feeling. Normal ride-share small talk, the kind you have with 100 different drivers and never remember by the next week. About 5 minutes into the ride, at a red light, he said something that didn't register as strange at first. "Rough week for you, huh, with everything going on at your building?" I remember pausing, half listening, half scrolling through my phone. "What do you mean?" "The water main thing. Your building's been dealing with that for like 2 weeks now, right?" I looked up from my phone. Our building's water main had, in fact, broken 2 weeks earlier, and the building management company had spent that entire time doing repairs, cutting water off in irregular blocks, sending irritated group emails to residents. It was a genuinely obscure, building-specific inconvenience, not something you'd casually know unless you lived there, worked there, or had some other very specific reason to know it. I had never mentioned it in any rideshare conversation, not to Marcus, not to any driver. "How do you know about that?" I asked, and I remember my voice coming out a little more clipped than I intended. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Oh, I think I picked someone up from your building a while back. Small world, right?" It was a reasonable-sounding explanation. It was also, I would later learn, completely untrue. I told myself the explanation made sense. Rideshare drivers pick up dozens of people a week from the same buildings, especially in a downtown area with a lot of apartment complexes. It was entirely plausible he'd picked up a neighbor of mine who'd complained about the water main issue. I went back to my phone. I told myself the moment had passed. It hadn't. About 10 minutes later, closer to my neighborhood now, he made another comment, smaller this time, almost offhand, the way you'd mention something you assumed the other person already knew. "You still doing the early gym thing? 6 a.m. crew?" I do go to a 6 a.m. spin class, 3 mornings a week, at a small studio 2 blocks from my apartment. It is not something I post about online. It is not something that comes up in casual conversation with strangers. I stared at the back of his headrest for a long moment before I answered. "How would you know that?" This time there was a small pause before he answered. Not long, maybe half a second, but long enough that I noticed it. "Small talk," he said. "People mention stuff. I don't know, I just remember things." I did not believe him. Something in my chest had shifted from mild unease into something colder and more specific, and I spent the rest of that ride with my hand resting on the door handle, doing the math on how far we were from my apartment and how fast I could get out if I needed to. We pulled up outside my building a few minutes later. I said a quick, tight goodbye, gave him 5 stars out of pure reflex before I'd even processed what had happened, and got out of the car faster than I normally would. I stood on the sidewalk and watched his taillights disappear around the corner, and I remember standing there in the cold October air, feeling something I didn't have words for yet. I went inside, I locked my door, I sat on my couch with my laptop and pulled up my Rideshare account, and I did something I had genuinely never done before in years of using the app. I looked at my ride history. Marcus had driven me before, not once, 4 times over the past 2 months, all late-night rides home from work, all rides I had barely registered because that's how rideshare apps work. You stop noticing the drivers after a while. They become part of the background noise of getting from one place to another. 4 rides, all the same driver, all requested through an algorithm that was supposedly matching me with whoever was closest and available. I stared at that list for a long time, doing math I didn't want to do. I want to explain something about how rideshare matching actually works because it matters for what happened next. The app is not supposed to let a driver simply wait for a specific rider. Rides are assigned through a proximity and availability algorithm. In theory, getting the same driver 4 times in 2 months, all late at night, all from the same office building, was possible by pure chance. Drivers do work specific areas at specific hours, and if he regularly worked downtown after 9 p.m., our paths could cross through nothing more than coincidence and shared routine. I wanted very badly to believe that, but there was a detail nagging at me that coincidence couldn't explain. The water main issue in my building, the 6 a.m. spin class, those weren't things a driver could learn from simply transporting me in silence 4 times. Those were things you learned by watching someone, or by finding someone's information somewhere else entirely. I did the thing you're not supposed to do, which is I searched his name, the same name on the app, along with fragments of what I'd learned about him during the rides. And after almost an hour of scrolling, I found a public social media profile. It took me another 20 minutes of scrolling to find the connection. He didn't know me from picking up a neighbor. He worked part-time as a maintenance contractor for a property management company, the same property management company that managed my apartment building's water main repairs 2 weeks earlier. He'd had legitimate access to tenant complaint logs, unit numbers, resident sheets, administrative access for maintenance scheduling purposes, completely separate from his rideshare driving. And somewhere in that access, he had found my name, my unit, and enough personal detail to make small talk feel like something much colder. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, cross-referencing everything, building a timeline in my head that I could barely believe even as I was assembling it. In the morning, I called the non-emergency police line and explained everything, the repeated rides, the details he shouldn't have known, the maintenance company connection. The officer who eventually took my report was patient and thorough, and I could tell from the careful way she wrote things down that this wasn't the first time she'd heard something like it. Unfortunately, she told me, this happens more than people realize. Someone with legitimate access to a database, tenant records, delivery logs, medical intake forms, ride-share passenger histories, can quietly build a profile on a specific person without ever technically breaking any law until the moment they act on it. She explained that my case sat in a frustrating legal gray area. He hadn't touched me, he hadn't threatened me directly. He had, at most, made a few comments in a car that could be explained away, and had been, by him, when I confronted the situation later through a formal complaint. But he had also, they discovered through the rideshare company's internal investigation, manually requested and canceled several other ride matches over those 2 months in a pattern that only made sense if he had been trying to specifically position himself to be assigned to my late-night pickups. That detail, the manual override pattern, was enough to get him permanently removed from the rideshare platform and referred for further investigation. It was not, on its own, enough for an arrest. I changed my routine completely after that. I stopped taking rides from the exact same intersection outside my office every night. I varied my pickup location by a block or two, deliberately, every single time. I started sharing my ride status with a friend automatically, every ride without exception, a feature most rideshare apps have built in that almost nobody actually uses until something like this happens to them. I never saw Marcus again, as far as I know. I don't know, to this day, exactly what his intentions were beyond the discomfort of those 2 rides. Whether it would have escalated into something worse if I hadn't noticed the pattern when I did, or whether it would have stayed exactly where it was, a low, persistent creepiness that never crossed into anything more. I have decided I don't need to know the answer to feel like I made the right decision by paying attention. What stays with me is this. The thing that made it so unsettling wasn't a threat or a weapon or a raised voice. It was information. Small, specific, accurate pieces of my life offered casually in a tone designed to sound like coincidence. That is a very particular kind of fear. The fear of realizing that someone has been quietly collecting details about you, patiently, without your knowledge, long before you ever noticed them doing it. If you use a rideshare app regularly, and statistically, if you're watching this, there's a very good chance you do, I want you to take one specific thing from this story. Pay attention to small talk that feels slightly too accurate. Most of it is completely innocent. Drivers talk to 100 people a week, and coincidences happen more often than we like to admit. But if a driver knows something about your life that you never told them, and there's no reasonable explanation for how they'd know it, do not talk yourself out of that discomfort, the way I almost did. Check your ride history. Vary your pickup and drop-off points if something ever feels wrong. Use the trusted contact ride-sharing feature every single app now offers, every single time, not just when you think you need it. The version of safety we're sold with these apps, the license plate check, the star rating, the driver photo, creates a feeling of control. Real safety is something you build yourself, on top of that, by paying attention to the details that don't add up. I got lucky. I noticed the pattern before it became something worse. Not everyone notices in time. Check your ride history tonight. See who's actually been driving you home.